Today, the U.S. and Russia agreed to extend the only remaining treaty that limits the deployment of nuclear weapons. New START restricts strategic or long-range nuclear weapons. Today's agreement will last until 2026, but there are critics who say the treaty and the Biden administration's efforts to extend it didn't go far enough. Nick Schifrin has the story.
They're the world's deadliest weapons, able to fly thousands of miles in 30 minutes and obliterate entire cities. And for 10 years, the deployment of Russian and American long-range nuclear weapons has been restricted by New START.
Today is an important milestone for nuclear security and nonproliferation and for U.S.-Russia relations.
In 2010, President Barack Obama and then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev signed the New Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or New START. It limits Russia and the U.S. to 1,550 nuclear warheads, undeployed land and sea-based ballistic missiles, and heavy bombers. And those warheads can be carried by no more than 700 missiles and bombers. It also includes verification measures, such as movement notifications, data exchanges, and on-site inspections. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrote, "Extending the New START treaty makes the United States, U.S. allies, and partners, and the world safer. An unconstrained nuclear competition would endanger us all."
The future of nuclear arms control must address all nuclear weapons.
But the Trump administration called the treaty deeply flawed because it does not limit Russia's shorter-range deployed nuclear weapons, as former Special Envoy for Arms Control Marshall Billingsley said last year.
Maybe during the Cold War it made sense to talk about strategic or non-strategic nuclear weapons. I would say that is not what we feel anymore. We view every nuclear warhead as having strategic implications.
The Trump team also tried to get Russia to cap the number of all nuclear warheads, short and long range, including those in storage, something Russia has never agreed to. And it sought to include China, as former Assistant Secretary of State Chris Ford told me last year.
We think it's essential that China live up to its obligation to pursue negotiations in good faith towards avoiding nuclear arms race.
Today, Ford told me the Biden administration should have demanded a shorter extension.
I just think it's a bit of a squandered opportunity. We didn't have to extend it for 5 years. We could have extended it incrementally and used successive extensions as a tool of a negotiating strategy for dealing with the Russians and perhaps others.
Ford also says Biden's campaign promise to extend New START undercut Trump negotiators with the Russians.
If they wanted a full 5-year extension with no strings, they knew that they didn't have to talk to us at all, because Biden would come into office, as indeed he has now done, and give them precisely that. So the Russians, in effect, had essentially zero reason to talk seriously with U.S. diplomats for the better part of 2020.
For more on this, we turn to Rose Gottemiller, who is currently a distinguished lecturer at Stanford University. During the Obama administration, she served as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security and was the chief U.S. negotiator of the New START agreement. Rose Gottemiller, welcome back to the NewsHour. What's your reaction today to the Biden administration extending New START for 5 years?
I'm delighted. I think it's the right move for the United States of America because, we are embarking on some modernization of our nuclear forces, and I think we really need the predictability and stability that New START will give us over the next 5 years to make sure that we can do that modernization and keep the price tag within bounds. Otherwise, I think we might be chasing the Russians as they build more missiles and more warheads, and we couldn't end up having the kind of predictable nuclear modernization process that we need right now.
You heard, of course, some of the criticism in that piece. Chris Ford, Marshall Billingsley say that the administration should have tried for a shorter extension, perhaps only 1 year, and that the Biden administration gave up leverage. What's your response to that?
The leverage myth. I do think it's pretty hilarious because, first of all, when President Biden came into office, I wasn't at all sure that he was going to go for a 5-year extension. There was a debate among his own team over that. People like Victoria Nuland, very well respected, have been saying that we should try for some leverage on this. I simply disagree with that because the Russians have been very, very clear for the last year plus that they don't want this treaty more than we do. And therefore, they were signaling that they would not be leveraged in this way. And so that's why I call it the leverage myth. I just don't think it would have happened.
Do you think that extending New START by 5 years, one day after Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was sentenced to more than 2 years in prison, just a few days after the Russian security forces arrested thousands of protesters on the streets of Moscow, sends the wrong message to the Kremlin?
I have to say, nuclear weapons are an existential threat to the United States. These missiles, these long-range missiles armed with nuclear warheads, could obliterate the United States in 30 minutes and indeed destroy the globe if we somehow got into a major nuclear exchange with the Russians. So that kind of existential threat means, to my mind, that we have to keep working these problems. We have to keep working them, despite the fact we have severe disagreements with the Russians in many, many areas. And that, in fact, was a clear message from the administration, from President Biden today and Secretary of State Blinken, saying that we have to be clear-eyed about the challenges from Russia and really press them on those issues that are so difficult, so problematic. Their cyber attacks, the Alexei Navalny case, so many other things that are troubling about what Russia is up to today.
We saw in the story some members of the Trump administration negotiating team. Do you think the Trump administration did well to overcome some of Russia's long-term demands to get to the point where New START could be extended today by the Biden administration?
Frankly, I give the Trump administration credit for a couple of things. One thing is that they established the principle that we should directly limit warheads, and I think that's a good thing in that freeze that they proposed on all nuclear warheads. So that was a good principle to establish, and I know that President Biden intends to carry it forward because he said in his announcement today that he plans to be working next on a treaty to limit all nuclear weapons. So I think that that is a really good step. The other thing, though, and here I think it's important to say that China should be at the table as well. And here, too, President Biden today said that, yes, indeed, China should be part of the next phase of discussions, and I welcome that news very much also.
How do you propose tackling China? Beijing has said that its number of nuclear weapons, believed to be in the hundreds, would have to be somehow matched by the U.S. and Russia, which have well over 1,000, before Beijing would be willing to even undertake arms control negotiations. How can that challenge be tackled, do you think?
Yeah, you're really right. We don't want to encourage them to build up. That's the last thing we want them to do. But we need to look for areas where there is some equality of capability on the Chinese side. For example, hypersonic glide vehicles. These are new technologies, new missiles that are being developed that are super fast and super accurate. There is some equality of capability in China, in Russia, in the United States developing as well. Here is an area where all three of us may have an interest in sitting down together. I also think we may have a more or less equal interest in constraining ground-launched intermediate-range missiles that really are out there proliferating at a time when the INF Treaty has now gone away. So we should be, I think, ready to engage the Chinese, but we need to engage them where they may have an interest in coming to the table because they want to see some restraints on us, perhaps on the Russians as well, not just forcing them in a direction they don't want to go, like building up their warhead numbers. That is not good for U.S. national security, definitely.
Rose Gottermiller, thank you very much.
Thank you.